There we go.
Up to you.
Paul is with us from the UK. Hey, Paul.
Evening or morning. Right, yeah, bit of a last minute thing, but I thought I could do a bit of a talk on airbrushes, different types, what you can do with them, and just a few little tips and tricks that you might find useful if you're using them. So I'll start off at the bottom with the compressor. This one here, it's an airbrush compressor. I thought when I bought this, I thought I'd go for one that's a moderate size. This one's a 2-cylinder, so it gives you a little bit more airflow and a little bit more pressure if you need it. So 2-cylinder, it's on this end, you can see there's a regulator with a dial there. You adjust this regulator here to get your pressure, and you've got your air outlet. And at the bottom of the regulator, you've got here a water filter, so that'll take any water out of the airflow. These are oilless compressors, so it won't put any oil into the airflow. That's really all there is to it.
Paul, what pressures do you run on your airbrush?
It depends on the paint I'm using. Full blast, that will do 60 psi or 4 bar. On a thin paint ink type, I would probably run about 20-25 psi. On some of the thicker ones, 30 to 40. But I adjust the airflow or the pressure I set to, depending on the paints. I mean, you can experiment with that. If you've got a compressor, then with a regulator, you can practice your airbrushing on piece of paper, a bit of cardboard, anything like that. I mean, I'll be doing a bit of that in a minute anyway. But you can get different techniques with adjusting the airflow as well. There's one or two sort of techniques you can actually go outside the normal range and do things with it. But anyway, that's just, I thought I'd just show you the compressor to start with. That's a useful aid. If you want to just have a go at airbrushing, you can buy the airbrush and just buy cans of compressed air. And it's a more expensive way of doing it, definitely, because you've got to keep buying cans of air. I'm just plugging my hoses into this compressor. What I've got on my hoses, let me just switch to this camera, put it under there. That's the tip of my air hose there, and it's got a bayonet connector. So you slide that sleeve back there, and it's just a bayonet connector. These are very cheap. I buy them on eBay for, I don't know, about £3 or something like that. And I fit the other end of the bayonet to each of my airbrushes, so I can quickly swap airbrushes. And also that bayonet, when you take the airbrush off, it seals the hose, so you don't lose the pressure out of the tank. I'm just going to turn this tank on so it's pressurizing. Well, it would be if I turn the power on. Yep, that helps. Right, so I'll just leave that pressurizing. So that's the compressor. I'll switch to over here. Quick sort of run through the types of airbrushes. This one here, that's what I used the last demo I did with those bud vases to spray spirit dyes, which are very thin. The advantage of this is what they call a single action airbrush, by the way. You've got on off basically with the button here. There you see the bottom, that's the bayonet connector to connect to my hose, and here you've got a preset nozzle to adjust the paint flow into the airstream. These work on a siphon effect. You've got a tube into the bottle, and that comes out at the top and attaches to the airbrush. So you're sucking the paint up there with what they call a Venturi effect. The air is passing across the end of this tube, and that's drawing paint up into the airflow. So what they call a siphon feed type. I find these great for those spirit dyes that I use on the vases and other things I use those dyes for, because I have one bottle with each color in. So when I want to switch colors, I just switch bottles. or I've got a few of these airbrushes as well. So if I'm using 3 or 4 different colors, I might set up one airbrush with each color. If I'm going to use them more than once and keep switching back and forth, I'll set up a few airbrushes and just unplug one, plug another one in and go. But these are great from costs as well. These, I mean, this one cost me about £7.50, which is about $10 probably, not far off. So they're very cheap. There's not a lot you can do with them in terms of servicing them. You can clean these nozzles, that part comes off, but all the trigger mechanism, etc., in here, you can't take that apart. So they're not entirely serviceable. But having said that, I've got one of these that I've had for 20 years nearly, and it's still going. It's a little bit stiff on the trigger, but I think I bought about 8 years ago, I bought one to replace it, and I haven't had to throw it away yet, but it's still in use. So they are cheap and cheerful, but for that sort of blanket coverage, they're ideal. If you're not after precise lines and graphic design, then that sort of airbrush is great, especially with, as I said, the spirit dies. Moving on to the next one, this one, that's what they call a dual action, a sort of two action airgun. You've got the trigger here. I press that up and down to get air in, and I can go part way down with that, whereas the other one, really, it's like a switch. It's sort of on or off. There's not a lot of control there. This one, you can regulate the airflow with the trigger if you're used to using it, and then you pull the trigger back to introduce ink into the airflow. So that's why they call them a sort of two action or dual action. And when I'm holding that normally, that's just all controlled with my finger, basically. One finger controls it all, and that's it. At the back here, you've got another little adjuster, and what that does is it's basically a stop for the needle. When I pull that trigger back to let the ink into or paint into the airflow, what I'm doing is I'm withdrawing a needle which runs through the whole body of that gun. And when you see that moving back at the back here, when I push the needle back, on the end here there's a little screw, and if I screw that in, you can't really see it on the camera, but what it does is it pushes a stop forward. And now that you see that trigger, if I wind that in, I can't move the trigger very far at all. So it acts as a stop for the needle. So if I want to set a stop at 50% paint flow, I just set it about there, and I know that the trigger won't go more than halfway back, even if I try and force it. So that's there for that purpose, and that's quite common on these dual action air guns. You also notice this one is what they call a gravity feed. You've got a cup above the airflow rather than below, so it's literally dropping the paint into the airflow when you press that trigger. So that's working in that way. The advantage of these is you put a few drops of paint in there and you spray it, and then you either add more of the same, or you can switch colors very quickly and very easily, and it's very economical on paint. You don't really waste much more than the few drops you've put in if you decide you've had enough of that color. So the paints last quite a long time. This type cost, I think it cost me about £30, so that's what, nearly $40. They start off a little bit below that, and they go up to considerably more. I've got another one here. This one, it's a similar style airbrush. It's got the same features as the first one, but it's also got here a regulator for airflow, so I can actually preset the airflow on the gun as well as on the compressor, so that gives me a little bit more control. This one's a more expensive one. That's a $250 airbrush, but in many respects those two do much of the same thing. The big difference for me between the two is this one has a 0.2mm nozzle, this one has a 0.5mm nozzle, and I bought this one to use thicker types of paint, and I use a whole range of different paints. I'll come to those in a minute. So you can get anywhere from, I think it's about 0.15 is the smallest nozzle I think you can get. It's certainly just below 2. I can't remember the exact number. up to about 0.8 for most of the airbrush type paints, but you can get bigger nozzles for like enamel paints and all sorts of things like that. I think they go up to 1.2, 1.5, but most of the airbrush paints you'll be in that 0.2 to 0.8 range. Common sizes are 0.2, 0.3, 0.5 and 0.8. As I said, this one's a 0.5 and I use that for the thicker paints, and that it blows an awful lot of paint through very quickly if you're using it on that type of paint. And you can use this on the thinner paints, but I mean, it just blows the paint through really quick. So I tend to use the one with a smaller nozzle. These do require a bit of maintenance. Always clean them thoroughly after you use them. Don't leave them to dry and come back to them the following day, because acrylic paint being what it is, and that's what I use in these acrylic paints, when it's dry, it's not easy to clean off. So do it before rather than after. But on the cleaning side, if I just put those to one side, I've got these. This is just a little set of airbrush size bottle brushes, effectively. And then on that ring there's 5 different sizes of brush. Very cheap. And this one's a similar thing, but it's, rather than being brushes, it's just twisted wires. So if you've got a blockage in your air gun, you can use these to clear it out. And again, these are very cheap and useful for clearing blockages if you get one. The brush is just part of regular maintenance. Give them a clean every now and again, strip down with those and clean them. When I reassemble these type, the dual action, after I've removed the needle, I put some of this in. This is an airbrush lubricant. That's the packet it came with. It's called Super Lube and it's made by Medea. There are other manufacturers that make a similar product, but what this airbrush lubricant does is it helps the needle to slide where it's supposed to, and it also stops the paint sticking to the needle, so it makes it easier to clean when you come out to cleaning it. And you literally just put a smear of it on the needle when you reassemble it, and that's all there is to it. And to be honest, I don't put that on every time I clean the gun, but every now and again I'll take the needle out, make sure it's pretty much spotlessly clean, and then just put a smear of that oil on it and put it back together. So it's good insurance, basically. Just same with any tool, maintain it and it'll look after you, won't it? So it pays to look after them. Right, so that's the guns. Moving on to accessories. I use the gun sometimes just for graduated sort of coverage and painting sort of areas, but I also use it for, let me just do a share screen. I'll show you something that I do as well. That sort of thing. Can you all see that?
Yeah,
what that is, it's about a 16-inch sycamore platter. I think it's sycamore. And the way I've done the colors on that is using masking film. And you draw out your design, you cut it all through with a scalpel, and then you peel off areas selectively and spray them. So that's how that one was done. I'll show you the equipment I used to do that. First thing is this. It's a sort of semi-translucent film. It's got a paper backing on it, but when you peel that off, it's almost transparent, but it's got a matte finish, which makes it easier to draw on. I usually use a fine marker pen, but you can just about get away with a pencil on that. It's called Frisket film. That's the wrapper that was on it. That's basically what it is, Frisket film. So you can buy that by the roll, different lengths, different widths. This one's about 1 foot wide. That does most things. On that platter, I think I had to put two strips of it to cover the platter, but that's what I use. You can use masking tape and all sorts of other things to do masking, but on a large area, this is far easier than masking tape, and also you can see through it. It does come in transparent and translucent, I believe, and possibly gloss and matte, but I found the matte stuff better for writing on. So I stick that on and I do the design on the film and then cut through it. And the cutting through it bit Good scalpel is what you need for that. And you want, again, with any tool, you want it to be sharp. This one's just a simple medical type scalpel with a straight blade on it. That's great for a lot of what you do. The other thing I use is one of these, they call it an X-Acto knife. And you see the blade on the end there, it actually rotates. So as I change direction, the blade steers with it. So it's great. These are great for doing curves. So I have both types of knife and they both have their uses. When you're actually cutting this film, remember, and another useful accessory, cork. So put that on the end of the blade, and that goes in my box, and I'm not going to stab myself when I'm rooting around in the box trying to find it. So that's the accessories I use with the frisket film. Other things you might find useful, things like this, French curves. So if you're marking out particular curves, they're quite useful, because on those three, there's just lots of different curves you can use. So they come in handy with some of the designs you might get into. Another one I've got here is just a little compass cutter. You've got your point there, which is obviously what you center it on. On this end, you've either got a little scalpel blade, which is what it's got on at the moment, or you can change that for a pencil lead. So you can either use it for drawing or cutting. And it's simple. You just undo that, set the width of your circle, tighten it up, and away you go. And these come in different sizes. This one will go up to 6-inch circle. So quite handy for marking out if you're trying to mark out circles. One tip with that, the point itself, if you're doing this on a piece of wood and you don't want to make indentations with the point, just get a little piece of plastic, like a piece of milk carton or something like that, piece of a yogurt pot, you put that under the point, so it stops it penetrating the wood. And you can even put a bit of masking tape over the piece of plastic so that doesn't move. So just to protect your work. Other useful accessories, just a small paintbrush, and I use these just for cleaning the airbrush. Obviously you can paint with them as well, but these are really good when you finish with the actual paint. As you get into the cup and you sort of brush it as clean as you can, and then blow it through. So I always keep one of those in the box with the airbrushes, just for use with cleaning. While we're on the subject of cleaning, one thing I've got here, this is one of the airbrush paint bottles. That's just full of water. When I finish spraying, I'll just put some water in there and spray it through. It's just handy to have one or two of these bottles with water in for that purpose. I also use this stuff, which is an airbrush cleaner. And if you haven't got it, just a little bit of dishwashing detergent in water is probably the next best thing. To be honest, what's in there probably isn't a lot different to that. You just put a few drops of that in the air gun, brush out the little cup, and then blow it through. And when I'll show you the cleaning cycle I do when I've used the gun. I will do a little bit of spraying in a minute. But onto the different paints I use. A lot of people go for ones like these. These are Golden and Comart, the two makes I use. There are a couple of others out there as well. And with these come in 1 ounce bottles. I think they're about £4 a bottle, give or take. So that's what, $5–6 a bottle. You can usually buy a set, which brings the price down a little bit, as long as the colors you want are in the set, obviously. But there are loads of different colors of these, and you can mix and match. And also, both makes do translucent and opaque. So you can see there the Golden, at the top it says transparent. And on the one that isn't transparent, next to it, it doesn't say anything. So you see right at the top on that blue band, it either says transparent or it says nothing on the Golden. On the Comart, at the bottom, it says transparent, if it's transparent. And I'm just trying to find one that isn't. There's one. That one's a Comart and it says opaque. So on Comart, it tells you on both which it is. Whereas Golden, it either says it or it doesn't. So that's an opaque Golden because it doesn't say transparent. So hope that makes sense. These colors, you just twist the top and use it as a dropper. So they're very easy to use, and very economical because, as I said, you just put a few drops into the gun. Those types of paints, these are acrylic airbrush paints. These are probably as close as you're going to get to gallery quality. It says on this one, light fastness 1. That's the highest number you can get on that light fastness scale. So they do vary. Some of them should have a lower light fastness rating, but the good paints usually tell you what the light fastness rating is. The cheaper ones probably don't. But those I really like. They come in lots of colors. You can augment them with additives. I mean, I've got one of these bottles the same size as this, which has just got a pearlescent medium in it, and you can either spray it over the colors or you can mix it with the colors and use it in either of those ways to get a pearlescent iridescence to it. One thing is probably worth saying about the opaque and the transparent. It's probably obvious, but I'll say it anyway. The opaque, if you spray that over another color, you start to obliterate the color beneath because it's opaque. You can't see through it. With the transparent paints, if you're spraying a transparent over something, what's beneath it will still come through. So you're mixing the colors because you've got one see-through paint on top of the other. So it depends on the effect you're trying to get. In terms of shading, you can mix these colors with white to lighten them, you can mix them with black to darken them, or you can spray that on and then you can overspray it with a mist of white or black, or what you get in these as well as the black is, I mean, here I've got a transparent black, so I can spray that over any color to darken it. But you also get what they call smoke, like an opaque smoke or a transparent smoke, and that's used as a shade over the top, so you can darken your colors with the smoke shade on the top. So it's lots of ways you can combine colors to do different things. So going on to some of the other paints, another one I quite like are these Createx. These are all pearlescent or pearlized, it says. That's one. You can see here all the other colors, and they're quite in your face loud colors, but on the right piece that they work, I quite like them. I don't use them on everything, but on some things they work quite well. But they are quite loud colors, but yeah, I quite like them. These are thicker colors. And again, you can buy those as individual bottles, or you can buy the set. Let's just peel that off there, I don't want that. I'm trying to remember how much I paid for those, but it's a long time ago. I can't remember. I remember it was cheaper to buy the set rather than buy them individually. So I went and bought the whole set. And I think there's 14 different colors there, and they're all pearlized. So if you like that iridescent, you can use those. Also in the sort of pearlized iridescent range, you've got these. These are the chestnut iridescent paints. Again, airbrush acrylics. And they've got 9 different colors. And some of those are quite loud. And then chestnut have also got these, which are metallics. And there are 3, 6, 8 of those. You see there, I don't know quite how the metallicness shows through, but you can see on that one, it looks golden at that point. If I turn it over, it looks more purple. But if you give it a good shake, those colors mix, and that's supposedly a pink. But yeah, you can see there the sort of iridescence of it, the metallic element in there. So they're quite interesting. But all of those 3, the Createx and the 2 chestnut ones, they're the thicker colors that I would use with a bigger nozzle. A 0.2mm nozzle really struggles with those, even if you thin it, which you can do, but even thinning it, it's down to the particle size of the paint as much as anything else. It's not just the viscosity of it. So I prefer the 0.5 nozzle for those. And when I use it, I've got some, this is a flow medium. This is an acrylic flow medium, and you mix that with the paint. I usually put, let's say I put 8 drops of paint, and I'll put maybe 3 drops of flow medium and 3 drops of water, and mix that in the gun and then spray it. You can put more flow medium, you can put more water. It's up to you. But I just tried to thin it to the point where it flows nicely and sprays well. You can always control how much you're putting on with the gun. So that's the different colors. I'm just going to connect one of these up and we'll just do a bit of spraying. When we sort of came into the meeting earlier, I picked up this gun and it was feeling a bit stiff. This is the expensive one. This is what was it? I water that one. The needle was feeling a little bit stiff, so I quickly pulled the needle out, cleaned it off, put a little bit of that lube on and put it back in, and now it's running free. So all good. If you've not used an airbrush before, it's helpful to just have a play with it, get used to it. So pick a color of paint. I'll do a dark blue here. These pots, by the way, have got a little agitator in them, so you shake them until you hear the ball rattling, and then shake it some more. You want that paint well and truly distributed. Otherwise, you've got the solvent at the top and all the actual paint at the bottom, so you're not going to get full use of the pigment. So I'll just give that a quick shake. I've set my compressor to, as I said earlier, about 20 psi for this paint. So I'll just check in where it is. It's about 25. I'll leave it there.
Hey, Paul, can I interrupt for one moment before you do that?
Of course.
Because it's the bottom of the hour, and we like to remind folks that they're tuned into the Worldwide Woodturners. And if you'd like to participate, Paul will take questions in a little bit. And we have another demonstrator that's going to show us technique in a little while. And all these demonstrations are free, and they're for you, the wood turner. So with that, stick around. We got a lot more coming. Paul is back with us again. Paul, I'm out of here.
Okay. One thing to bear in mind with the compressor, I'm just going to show you some spraying with this one. What comes out of the nozzle, imagine a cone. So the closer you get to the nozzle, the narrower the area of spray. So I'll demonstrate that and show you a couple of things you can do here. I'm just going to put a few drops in here, literally 5 drops of paint in there. So if you can see this piece of paper here, I'm just going to move that so I can see where the edge of it is, so I know what I spray is going to appear on the camera. Right, so I'm going to spray this from about 6 inches above the paper. I'll do it over that side, and I'm pushing the trigger down, and you can see nothing's coming out. So until I pull the trigger back, nothing will come out. So I start to withdraw the trigger. You see there, paint. So I'm not moving, just do a solid blast of paint, and that's about 2 inches coverage at 6 inches. If I want a thicker line, I'll come a bit farther away. I'm now probably 8-9 inches away. So you can see it's taking longer to cover it, but it's a bigger circle. And now if I come in really close, I'm literally 1/4 inch away. Bring the trigger back so it starts to spray. And you can see there I can pretty much write with it. And I'm just off the paper there, so you can go from this down to a pencil line pretty much, and anywhere in between. One useful sort of practice thing you can do with this, I remember seeing this in, it was either in a book or on a video I watched, but a good way of practicing with your airbrush is as you get close, you draw some lines like this. I'm doing it a bit quick, but you get the idea. You draw some lines there, and you basically make a cross pattern like that, and then you use it as for target practice, and you point your gun at one of those intersections and then spray paint, and the idea is to try and hit where the lines cross. So it's just good for getting your eye in on aiming the gun at the paper.
Teach muscle memory.
So that's just a good one for practicing. Other things you can do is sort of create a circle and try and shade it, and you can sort of create a cube and shade that, things like that. I'm just doing this roughly here. But you can sort of start on one side and shade lightly, and then put more color in on the other side, and adjust the distance of the gun and see how that works out, so you can put shading on. So just get a bit of paper or a bit of cardboard and just get a feel for using the gun. And once you've done a bit of that, I mean, I don't use this terribly often, so I wouldn't call myself the best airbrusher in the world, but with what I do, I can get by and do the sort of either the masking techniques or the blanket coverage. I've just put a few more drops of paint in here because I've just about used up. But what I did there, I did with that 5 drops of paint I put in initially. So that's about it on the sort of the accessories and the colors and stuff. Anyone got any questions at this point?
So do you dilute the paint at all, or is it just straight paint?
It's airbrush paint. It's acrylic airbrush paint. The stuff in these little bottles, these Comart and Medea ones, Comart and Golden ones, they are really like an ink. It's very thin, but they spray really well in these guns with fine nozzles. So that's what I use them for, because they spray well. But yeah, I mean, it's all airbrush paint. All of these colors I showed you, that's exactly what they are. They're sold as airbrush paints.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you there. You said something about spraying dyes with them. Do you use the alcohol-based dyes or the water-based?
I do,
dyes?
yes. I use the chestnut spirit dyes, and I use those in this type of gun, the single action gun with the bottles. And I have a different bottle with each color in. And I find that a much more convenient way of using it, because I can just switch bottles when I want to change color. I don't have to clean it out. All I do is blow the gun onto a bit of tissue or a bit of scrap cardboard or anything, just to blow through the remains of the previous color before I start spraying the new color onto the wood. Or, as I said earlier, I set up 3 or 4 of these if I'm using a few colors and constantly switching. You know, these guns are so cheap. I've got a few of those. They're very sort of convenient to use in that way. But yeah, these are the ones I use with spirit dyes.
Does the alcohol, is there, I'm assuming there's O-rings in there somewhere. Does that
There
alcohol?
is, yes. Yeah, I mean, the spirit dyes are methanol based, aren't they? Methylated spirits based, or denatured alcohol, I think you call it over there.
Right.
Rather than ethanol based. But yeah, I mean, that might still have a sort of degrading quality on the O-rings. But as I said, the one of these I've had for nearly 20 years still works. I can't do much to take the needle apart if I did have to replace the O-ring, but as I said, they cost me £7.50, which is probably just under $10. And if it's lasted me 20 years for that price, I think I've got my money's worth. I wouldn't worry about the O-ring. I'll just buy another gun.
And
right.
folks, if you're wondering about the O-rings, like Johnny just asked about, the paint product does not pass through over an O-ring. It's a Venturi. The O-ring
on
is
most
mainly,
guns it doesn't. You're right. Yeah. I mean, the on here you've probably got an O-ring back here in the actual needle in the airflow, but the paint is introduced at the front end. It's introduced at the nozzle. It doesn't go through the trigger, and the same applies to the other gun. Actually, when you put the paint into the flow on these, let me just switch them around on these gravity feed. Your nozzle's back here. That might have seals on it, but the needle basically seals in a hole that's just a hole in the nozzle. There is no O-ring there at that point. So
Okay.
I think the only O-rings in here are on the airflow.
But if you are cleaning these guns, if you're cleaning these brushes, do not put them in a jar of cleaner like people would do paint brushes. No, you need to protect those O-rings. Don't soak that thing. Just clean it. Get away from it.
Yeah, I mean, this what I was saying about maintenance. These cheap guns, the black plastic ones, you can't do a lot with them. This type of gun, you can usually strip it down every single part of it, take all the seals out, take the springs out, etc. clean it all, put it back together. I don't normally strip it down completely, but you can. I can see on here there is an O-ring here where the cup goes onto the gun, because on this one it comes with 3 sizes of cup, so I can replace that with a bigger or smaller cup. That's a medium size. This one, the iWater, the gun is an integral, the cup is an integral part of the gun. You can't take it off, so there's no O-ring there either. Whereas on this one there is. You can, I don't know if you can make it out on the camera, but just there's a little red O-ring. But that one's easily replaceable should it ever need to be. But I'm going to switch over to the lathe.
I have a quick question for you. On the individual bottles, is there any indication as to what size tip you should be using that paint with?
No, not on any of the ones I've seen.
Okay, so you just have to learn which one to use by experience.
I think I remember vaguely with the Comart, it doesn't say on the bottle, but it does somewhere. I think it was either on the web or somewhere. I looked up the paint. It might have been on the site I bought them from. I can't remember, but they did suggest a needle size for the Comart paint. It was,
but basically so basically on a thinner paint, you're going to want the smaller nozzle size, and the thicker paints you're going to use the larger nozzle size. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, I mean, with these Golden and Comart paints, I just put them neat into the gun as they are. With the Createx or the Chestnut paints, I'll thin that with a bit of flow medium and a bit of water. You can thin them with just water, but I find flow medium and water, you get a better flow with it. So that's what I do. Any other questions at this point?
I've had some problems with the alcohol that it actually dries before it hits the surface sometimes when I was spraying it.
They do dry quick. Yeah, definitely. The airbrush paints dry quick because you're blowing it through. Well, obviously, you're putting airflow in there, and if it's not dry before it hits the paper, it dries very soon afterwards. But you get what they call sort of a paint freeze or something like that. You can get the paint building up around the tip of the nozzle. So right in here where the tip of the nozzle is, you can get paint drying on the tip of the needle, and that can cause inconsistencies in the spray pattern and problems with spraying. But you just take the two little covers off, clean the tip, put it back together, and you should hopefully good to go again. So, but yeah, that's caused by the paint literally drying as it's leaving the gun. So it can be a problem. Perhaps not so much here in England in our cold, damp environment, but in some parts of your country, no doubt that could be an issue where it's much warmer and drier. But yeah, occasionally I've noticed a problem with paint drying on the tip of the nozzle, so it can happen. Right, let me switch to camera. Right, so this one's on the lathe. You see here, I just put a screw chuck on. And I'm just going to put a piece of wood on there, but I thought before I put the piece of wood on, I just wanted to show you that I'm just trying to put this gun down without losing the paint. That is just steel, but you can see it doesn't look very steel. That's got many layers of paint over it, but I think I mentioned it on my last demo. This is how I get rid of it. Just a wire brush, run the lathe, and I'm just going to run that against the bottom of the screw chuck like this. Let's give it a good scrub. So you can see it's actually coming back to steel color, and I can do that bit in there as well. So a little bit longer and I'll get rid of all the paint. There's still a bit on there, but if I persevere, I'll get rid of the rest of it. But that's all I do to clean it. But to be honest, it doesn't matter what color the screw chuck is, as long as it works as far as I'm concerned. So what I'm going to put on here is a blank I've got pre-prepared. And this is one of the other things I do in demo, so I might do that at another stage. But today's was just going to be a fairly short talk with a little bit of demonstrator. So what I've got here, this is actually pine. So this is another one for my 2x4 club entry. This is yellow pine. I've turned the outside to a bowl shape. It's still solid, so it'll go on the screw chuck. And what I've coated that with is acrylic gesso, white acrylic gesso, and I've textured it. Again, that if I do that demo in the future, I'll show you how we do the texture as well. But I'll set my lathe running pretty slow, like 150 RPM, 100 RPM, something like that. What you don't want to do is run it very fast, because you might have paint coming off it if you run it too fast. But as I said, this paint dries fairly quick and you're putting on thin coats anyway. But I'm going to use the blue on this. So I've got my gun here. You probably aren't going to see the gun in the picture, but you'll certainly see the color change. I'm going to hold it about 6 inches away, and I'll start on the top edge with that same blue. And it's just starting to change color. And what I want to do is go about 2/3 of the way down with that. So that's just put a blue shade on it down to about here. But it's quite a light shade. You probably can't make out a lot of color on the camera yet. But I want to fade this from dark blue at the top to light blue 2/3 of the way down. And I'm moving my gun sideways fairly slow because I don't want to put diagonal lines in it. So I'm putting more color at the top than I am at the bottom and trying to get a fairly consistent, just put a bit more color in there. But that was the coverage from about 6 drops of paint. And as I said, I'm spraying from about 6 inches away. Come to 2/3 of the way round, back up to the top. And I want solid blue at the top and fading as it goes down. So I'm trying to get that graduated paint effect. So hopefully that shows up on the camera. And I've blown the rest of that paint through now. So that's all my blue done. It's always handy to keep a bit of kitchen towel around. Just clean the tops of these paint bottles when you close them. And I'm going to do the bottom half with a red. Find it. I've got one here. It just says bright red. So I'm going to go with that one. But before I put the red in, I'm just going to blow some water through. So I put a few drops of water in the gun. And I'll just show you here. I've just got water in there. So I'll blow that onto a piece of tissue. I'm not going to clean the gun properly, just literally blow through the excess there. That's good enough. I can now go to my red. If I'm going from a light color to a dark, I probably won't be too fussy about cleaning it. But if I go from a dark to a light, or such a significant change as blue to red, then yes, I do blow it through with some water first. So I've got some red here, put a few drops of that in.
I usually try to plan my painting to go from light colors to dark colors for that very reason.
Yeah, I mean, often I'll spray the light colors first. It's just that I happen to have the blue in the gun because I was doing that practicing over there. So I'll start at the bottom this time with the red. And again, I'll do a graduated blend from solid red at the bottom, fading it out as I come up. You can use as many or as few colors as you like on this. This one's a transparent red, so I might switch to an opaque red to get a stronger color. Let's see what I find in my box. Got a few different ones. But that paint I'm spraying on is drying almost as quick as it's hitting the surface. But if you want to, if it's not drying fast enough for you and you want to speed that up, what you can also do is just spray the gun air only. So you just spray air onto the surface to dry the paint. So you stop blowing paint, but you just blow in air and dust that across the surface for a little while, and that will dry the surface, and then you could put more color on it. Particularly if you're using the masking films, you don't want to put too heavy a coat of paint on in one go because it can bleed under the masking film. So you put a light coat on, let that dry, and then put another one. Don't ask me how I know about that bleeding problem.
You read about it. I know that.
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, I'm doing it again now, doing the red with an opaque red, and we'll see how that one looks. So we've got dark red at the top, fading out as it comes up into the blue. So we've got a fade from red to blue. I do these in sort of a number of different color combinations. I can grab a few on there, but that's the basic process. Once that's done, and that pretty much is done, I'll seal it with acrylic lacquer, and I usually use a satin lacquer rather than a gloss. I don't want those to be high shine. The satin lacquer for me is the level I want, so I'll just do it with that. So if I come back over to this one, let me just turn the lathe off. So I'm just going to clean the gun out now, and here you can see in the cup it's got red and blue. So I'm just going to put some water in, give that a shake, and blow it through onto my bit of kitchen towel here. So that's got most of that through. Then I can go to my airbrush cleaner. Again, put a few drops of that in the gun. And this time I'm going to pick up the paintbrush, just work that into the bottom of that cup and clean all around it. And you can even clean around the outside of the cup if you've got a bit of spillage on the outside of it. So work that right down into the bottom, clean and loosen any paint that's in there. Put the brush to one side, and then you can blow that through. Another tip: if you put your finger over, or the tissue over the end of the gun like this, and then spray, you see what happens? It bubbles black through. So you're blowing through and blowing it back. So you're getting a sort of a double clean. Blow a bit through, bubble it through again, and then blow it all through. And that helps to sort of clean the nozzle and blow back through the nozzle into the gun. So it gets it pretty clean. So I've blown all that through now. Just go back to the water, a few drops of water in there, give it a shake, and again, spray it into the kitchen tissue here. And when I've done that, and I think the gun's clean, I'll just unscrew the cover on the tip. Be careful when you do that, because that exposes the tip of the needle, and it is very sharp. It's a very small point, and it's also quite delicate because it is so small. So I'll just clean the tip there, put the gun down, pick up the nozzle I've just taken off, and just with the corner of the tissue, just clean inside that cup, because you do get a bit of a buildup of paint in that one particularly, because that's where the paint is sort of forms into that spray nozzle, into the conical spray. So put that back on to protect the tip, tighten that up again, and a quick blow through of air just to clean the gun, and that's it, it's done. So that's ready to go for the next one. So that's about what I had to show you. We've got any other questions? Oh yeah, I was going to show you some more bowls, wasn't I? I'll just grab a couple.
While you're doing that, I have a.
Pardon?
While you're doing that, I have a safety question. Would you normally be wanting to wear some kind of breathing protection while you're doing this, or is this not enough paint to wear?
I would say it's a good idea. Normally that would be a good idea. I mean, you're putting paint vapor into the air, and certainly if you're in a confined space, you want some sort of mask on to give you some filtration.
Okay.
So yeah, a mask is a good idea. Either that, or do it somewhere where you've got plenty of ventilation, so it's all being blown away from you. Do it outside, or if you've got the option to have doors open at both ends, so your air's blowing through your workshop, do that. But yeah, definitely consider a mask if you think you've got a sort of a significant amount of air in the paint in the air. I mean, these probably aren't as bad as cellulose-based paints that you get in spray cans, but still take precautions, I would say. Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
also might note that too much wind can affect your spray patterns. It can blow and alter the spray pattern, so just be a little.
Yeah. You don't want it to be blowing a gale, but a gentle breeze might be helpful. But But yeah, I'll show you these other bowls. This one's made out of ash, and again, I haven't finished these yet, but you can see there we've got sort of gradual. I'm just going to switch to the other camera, it's probably easier. That one there is a yellow to blue, so it's sort of got green in the middle where the yellow and blue have combined. This one's got a bit of texture on it. I don't know quite how well that gun shows it up, but the texture is basically created with the gesso. This one is also ash. And that was sort of my original series of these. I did about half a dozen different bowls in different colors, and the colors were sunsets. And this is one of those sort of sunset colors. You've got purple, orange, yellow, and at the top, the other way around, yellow and orange and purple. I quite like that one. I like that color sort of combination. I've been using that.
I like that color, Paul. Paul,
yeah.
Does the wood make any difference in how it takes the paint, or does the gesso take care of that?
Not a great deal, because I use gesso on top. But
Okay.
because I'm basically obliterating the grain on the outside of the bowl, I try and avoid an interesting blank. If I got some plain bits of wood like sycamore, or I mean ash is a light coloured wood, so I'll use ash sometimes. Lime, beech, anything like that. They're all the sort of the woods I would try and use, and I suppose on the scale of, if you're buying blanks, they're the cheaper ones anyway. But I've got another one here which is also ash. So I've done quite a lot in ash because I just got lots of ash, and that one is a purple and a green, again with a bit of texture. But I do a few different textures on these. But as I said earlier, that's probably for another demo, another day. But,
what are the dots on that bowl? It looked like white dots on it. What was that?
It's a texture. It's the base coat I'm using is acrylic gesso, artist's acrylic gesso. Let me find the pot. I'll show you what it is. Here we go. That one. White gesso primer. This one's Winsor & Newton. There are a few other paint makers that make this stuff, and artists use it for coating and undercoating the canvas before they start putting the colors on. So this is a primer for a canvas basically, and it's a mixture of acrylic and I believe it's got some plaster of Paris in it. But when it dries quite hard, and it's quite resilient. But it's quite thick. It's got a consistency of yogurt, and I use that to create texture. And what I do is I put it on the wood, and use either pretty thick, heavy brushes or other tools to put texture into the gesso. And that's what comes through with the color. But yeah, like I said, I'll do another demo on it one day with, and I'll show you the different textures I create and how I do them. That's probably.
What type of finish will you put on top of that?
Satin acrylic lacquer.
Light coats, light coats.
Yeah,
So
I don't want a high shine on those, so I avoid the gloss lacquers altogether. But satin finish for me is perfect. I mean, I usually use the chestnut one, which is in the green can like this. That's the one I use, and it's acrylic as well, so it's compatible with all the colors I've put on. It's all acrylic paints, acrylic lacquer, so it all works together.
And you don't get any type of crackle effect or nothing, right?
No, it doesn't. No, because they're all acrylic. They all work together, so that works fine.
Okay.
All I want to thank you for a great demo this evening, sir, and appreciate that. And a lot of technique in the program tonight. That's what we look for from our members, and we will look forward to doing another demo with you, sir. Let's set it up.
I will at some point. I'll maybe that's what I'll do for the next demo. Is the texturing I create with the gesso. But if anyone wants to go look on my website, which is at the bottom of my video there, creativewoodturning.com, there's a few examples of these bowls on my website.
Okay.
So a few different color combinations.
Again, thank you, Paul. Fantastic program tonight, and we appreciate. I have to let me see.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul, for the airbrush cleaner, is it depend on what type of paint you're using, cleaner, or is it just one cleaner for all?
I mean, this cleaner is really, it's intended for the acrylic paints. If you're using different types of paint, I suggest you use either the solvent that works with the paint or a specific cleaner for that. I mean, these acrylic paints are mainly water-based, so I think that cleaner is just water and perhaps some detergent. But that works. It cleans the gun. If you're using enamel paints, for example, you probably want like a cellulose thinners or something like that. So I suppose it depends on the paints you're using as to what you should clean the gun with. But with the
here's a safety tip: if you clean with something that's flammable, don't do it near your machine.
Yeah, good idea. But I mean, going back to this type of gun, the one I use with the Spirit dyes, those are methanol based, so that is potentially flammable. As Eddie said, be careful where you're spraying that. But when I finish with that, the way I clean it is I've got another bottle with just methylated spirits or denatured alcohol, as you call it, and I blow that through to clean the gun. But yeah, what's coming out is potentially flammable, so be careful where you spray it.
And you can run lacquer or polys or something like that through those airbrush guns as well.
You can, yeah. As long as you use the right solvent for cleaning them,
right?
Then in theory, yes. I mean, they've only got small cups, so you aren't going to spray a big area with them unless you're going to keep filling it up. But it depends on what you're trying to spray, I suppose. If you're just spraying a small piece of work, then
for your wood project, for the final coat.
For turning projects, you could do that. And these gravity feed guns are pretty. I mean, as you saw there, it was pretty quick and easy to clean. So
very informative. You got me hooked.
Good.
Yeah.
If anyone's got any questions, if you find my website, you'll find my email. So you can always send me an email, and I'm happy to answer questions if anyone's got any.
Right on. Thanks, Paul.
And